All right, buckle up, everyone. Looks like we're heading back to the Middle East, Gaza, to be specific. At least that's according to some statements last night from U.S. President Donald Trump, who floated the idea that the United States could take over and own the Gaza Strip, suggesting that it could lead to a long-term ownership position for the United States. Now, what we're going to do in today's video are play those clips showing the president saying these things. So we're all kind of starting from square one. We're then going to transition into some opinions in favor, some opinions opposed, and then the international reaction to this news. Now, if you like this type of content, don't forget to like the video. It's free and actually helps the channel quite a bit. And with that, let's dive into President Trump's statements last night.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
Now, following this press conference, he did open it up to reporters, and one asked, are you talking about some sort of permanent occupation of the Gaza Strip? To which he answered,
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent.
Right now, before getting into those in favor of this Trump plan to possibly move U.S. troops into the Gaza Strip, I want to do a quick map overview here to kind of show you the area that we're talking about. So zoomed out, looking at the broader Middle East. And the only reason I'm doing this is we're probably getting a lot of folks tuning in today that may not be super familiar with the area we're actually talking about. So we're coming in here to Israel. This here in the middle of the map is all of Israel. Here you have the Gaza Strip, which is what we're primarily talking about today. Here you have the West Bank. And then what's notable here is you have Jordan to the east of Israel, and then you have Egypt here to the west. And when looking at the Gaza Strip, Gaza actually shares a border with Egypt as well as with Israel. So this is the area that we're talking about today. And I will play some videos throughout this video showing just the level of devastation, the level of destruction in the Gaza Strip today to give you an idea of what any sort of rebuilding effort here would actually look like. Most estimates put it in the 5 to 10 year range. There's like borderline nothing left. Now, starting out with some official statements here, and every one of these resources in the video today will be linked in the description below if you want to look at them on your own. Most of these are coming from X because, quite frankly, we're a little bit ahead of kind of traditional media covering this from this perspective. So if we're looking for multiple angles of this, they're kind of going direct to the source. In this case, newly appointed Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, quote, Gaza must be free from Hamas. As the President of the United States shared today, the United States stands ready to lead and make Gaza beautiful again. Our pursuit is one of lasting peace in the region for all people. Very similar sentiment from the Speaker of the House, Representative Mike Johnson, who said, quote, the United States stands firmly with Israel and the people of the Middle East, which haven't experienced peace in many, many years. Violence and hatred do not have to define the region's future. Today, President Trump took the bold action in hopes of achieving lasting peace in Gaza. We're hopeful this brings much needed stability and security to the region. Now, shifting outside of government, kind of sort of here, we've got David Friedman, who served as the U.S. ambassador to Israel from 2017 to 2021. I do not believe he is currently involved directly in the U.S. government. He said, quote, Trump's proposed USA takeover of the Gaza Strip may sound out of the box, but it is brilliant, historic, and the only idea I have heard in 50 years that has a chance of bringing security, peace, and prosperity to the troubled region. Shifting totally outside of government now to what I would say is like a media influencer, if you will, Ben Shapiro. I imagine most people have heard of him, co-founder of the Daily Wire, a major conservative news outlet. He said, quote, undoubtedly the most extraordinary and unexpected element of Trump's first term was his remaking of the Middle East with the Abraham Accords. He achieved that Nobel Prize-worthy accomplishment by thinking outside the box, recognizing actual hard realities, and ignoring the conventional idiocy of the blob. He is doing the same now with Gaza. This vision is absolutely transformative. Whether this is his final vision of the region, a negotiation tactic to achieve better deals, or something else, there is no doubt that Trump's creative thinking is breaking the mold and changing things. Let Donald J. Trump cook. Get ready for my full take on tomorrow's show. Now, as of this recording, I just checked before hitting record, I haven't seen anything from Shapiro kind of expanding on this idea, at least not on X. And then shifting over to, again, kind of a right-leaning media here, Breitbart News, one of their editors at large, was really the only take I saw getting into kind of the why behind this. Joel Pollack said, quote, "A brief politically incorrect thread on why Trump's proposal for Gaza makes sense. It's a provocative way to push the Arab world to take responsibility for the Palestinians, rather than the failed approach of placing the entire burden on Israel and the U.S. to compromise. In the early hours after the October 7th attack, many Israelis and supporters of Israel said bellicose things aimed at restoring a sense that there was some kind of deterrent against the genocidal aim of Hamas, while the military deterrent, and for a moment, clearly faltered. In every existential conflict, only mutually assured destruction deters each side from aggression and encourages compromise. Israel's threat to Hamas, thanks to Biden and global pressure and the hostages, was not seen as credible, even as Israel crushed Hamas in battle. Trump has made a credible threat that Israel could not, albeit dressed in positive terms of prosperity and beautiful homes. He has talked about ending the Palestinian presence in Gaza. The Arab world is taking it more seriously enough to reject it firmly, but they'll do more. Watch." Now, this follows on the heels of what would have been the biggest news yesterday, was Trump talking about how maybe the Palestinians should not return to Gaza long term. So that was a major story yesterday, kind of in the works. And then, of course, we got this bombshell of, well, actually, maybe the United States will move in there anyways. And this is secondhand. So Emily Jacobs, a congressional correspondent, quoting Senator Fetterman, a Democrat, said, quote, "It is provocative and part of the conversation, but it is part of the conversation. And that's where we are. The Palestinians have refused, or they've been unwilling to deliver a government that provided security and economic development for themselves. They allowed 10/7 to occur, and now Gaza has to be rebuilt. Where are the people going to live? Where are they going to go?" So it's part of a conversation with where they're at right now. And what I'll do real quick here is show some scenes from the Gaza Strip to give you an idea. It's a very challenging setup. There's no clear solution here because big picture, if you look at the destruction, you have to move the people out of there to be able to rebuild this. There's no infrastructure. There's no water. There's no plumbing. There's no heating, no electric, no sanitation throughout major portions of the Gaza Strip. And throughout all of that rubble, you're going to see a lot of unexploded ordnance, whether it's IEDs set by Hamas that have not yet gone off, weapons depots that Hamas, that were maybe buried and are yet to be discovered. Unfortunately, they're probably going to be discovered when a bulldozer goes over some of these areas. And then, of course, some Israeli munitions that did not detonate when they hit the ground, because that happens all the time. So a lot of that throughout the Gaza Strip. There's going to be a major rebuilding effort that has to take place here. But the concern of the Palestinians is if they are asked to leave, they're concerned they might not be allowed to come back ever. So that's where you get this challenge of they obviously can't be there throughout the duration of this rebuilding. That's not realistic. Any other situation around the world, you would say move the people out. Palestinians are concerned that if they do move out, they're not going to be allowed to come back in. Now, shifting back over to some of the reactions here, there's a bit of a roll-up on the White House kind of press release forum here, and a couple of these that I wanted to share. We've already gone through a few, but I did see Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said, quote, "Under President Trump, America will be the beacon of peace for the world. It's time to change the Middle East in pursuit of ending endless war, and this is exactly how it's done." A little further down here on the bottom, it's a little bit cut off. It says, Senate Republican Conference said, quote, "Israel's enemies are our enemies. Senate Republicans are grateful to now have a president who stands up for America and our allies." And with that, I want to transition over to more of the opposition against this, those that came out and saying, this isn't actually a good idea. And there's a couple major camps this fell into. To back up a second, the Trump statements about the Palestinians should never go back was met with a lot of pushback on both sides of the aisle, saying this is textbook ethnic cleansing. Now, that conversation shifted a little bit when all of a sudden it was the U.S. might get directly involved, and we started to see the pushback take a couple different forms. One of those is it's a bad idea. It's not good. It's going to cost American lives. It's not in America's best interest. The other one is it's not actually a plan at all. So you'll see a bit of a divide here. Starting out with Chris Murphy, a Democratic senator from Connecticut, said, quote, "He's totally lost it. A U.S. invasion of Gaza would lead to the slaughter of thousands of U.S. troops in decades of war in the Middle East. It's like a bad, sick joke." That was echoed by Michael McFaul, a current professor of political science at Stanford and a former U.S. ambassador to Russia. who said, quote, "I thought Trump voters wanted to get out of forever wars. Invading and trying to occupy Gaza will drag America into a needless war that will last for decades. I'm shocked that anyone would even debate this idiotic proposal as a serious idea." And that was similarly echoed by former or retired four-star General Barry McCaffrey, who kind of walked that line, in my opinion, of saying it's a bad idea and it's such a bad idea that it's not actually an idea. General McCaffrey said, quote, "This is not a serious proposal for the U.S. to own Gaza. It's comical. Egypt and Jordan are not taking in 2.4 million Palestinians. Developers aren't going to front $50 billion to rebuild Gaza. The U.S. armed forces aren't going to muscle Hamas out of Gaza." And Senator Rand Paul spoke up as well, again, kind of on the line of just, it's not a good idea, saying, quote, "The pursuit for peace should be that of the Israelis and Palestinians. I thought we voted for America first. We have no business contemplating yet another occupation to doom our treasure and spill our soldiers' blood." Paul is a Republican senator from Kentucky. And then back to Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, who's been really vocal in really since Trump took office. I'm seeing more and more statements from Murphy. So he's ending up in a lot of these videos where I'm talking about the two sides because he's kind of becoming more and more prominent in speaking from the Democrat point of view, if you will. So we see a bit of a shift here where he says, quote, "I have news for you. We aren't taking over Gaza. But the media and the chattering class will focus on it for a few days, and Trump will have succeeded in distracting everyone from the real story. The billionaires seizing government to steal from regular people." Anybody trying to follow U.S. government activity in the last week or two at least understands where this is coming from. My God, there's like I just mentioned it in this video, right? Yesterday afternoon, there was a major story that that Trump had proposed that the Palestinians should never come back to the Gaza Strip. And before that even had a chance to really hit the news cycle, he talked about U.S. troops maybe moving into the Gaza Strip. That's how fast the news cycle is happening right now. So Murphy's opinion in this case, and I believe he echoed this again earlier today, is that it's not going to happen. It's a distraction of all of these other things that they want to see done. And interestingly, that's actually a similar take that was presented earlier today by the Jerusalem Post, where they said, quote, "Trump's Gaza plan isn't meant to work, but that's the point. They say on the face of it, Trump's plan for the U.S. to occupy Gaza is not remotely feasible, but that could all be part of the president's scheme." And there were a couple pieces here. Again, these articles will all be linked in the description below. There are a couple things that I wanted to highlight in this one, where they say, "This is Trumpian negotiation 101, lifted straight from his book, The Art of the Deal. In his world, you start with an extreme demand, one that is so outrageous it shifts the boundaries of what was previously considered possible. Then, when the inevitable pushback comes, you negotiate down to something that, while far less extreme than your initial position, is still a big win. You aim for 100, knowing that landing at 50 is still a success." They say for decades, Arab nations have loudly supported the Palestinian cause, but they have done little to materially improve the situation in Gaza beyond funneling money to Hamas. Egypt, which once ruled Gaza, keeps its border tightly sealed, building barriers that make Israel's security walls look lenient by comparison. And to go back to the map, this is the area down here we're talking about. There are significant Egyptian border guard security and military personnel blocking any Palestinians from entering Egypt. They say, meanwhile, wealthy Gulf states, despite Jordan, already home to a massive Palestinian population, wants no part of an influx from Gaza. Wealthy Gulf states, despite their enormous resources, have largely avoided offering Palestinian refugees permanent resettlement status or serious infrastructure investments in Gaza. So what they argue is that by throwing out a seemingly preposterous plan, Trump may be forcing these countries to react. Now, the other side of this that I feel like the Jerusalem Post did a good job of bringing up here is this, at its core, is kind of directly in contradiction to Trump's argument. And I would argue, one of the reasons he was elected, renewed position of America first. So America first, but all of a sudden we have troops possibly ending up in the Gaza Strip. It also has the possibility of, where is it right here? Regional stability to consider. An American military presence in Gaza would become an instant target for Iranian-backed militias, Hamas, and jihadi groups. The risk of constant insurgency-style attacks would make long-term governance impossible. So again, we're seeing this argument that it's just a negotiating tactic, not just brought up earlier today by U.S. Senator Chris Murphy, or I guess this was last night, but also today by the Jerusalem Post. Israel themselves saying this actually is not feasible at all. It must be step one towards a larger goal. Now, I do want to wrap up here with looking at some of the international reaction to this. And I kept this in the camp of opposition to the statement because across the board, I haven't found a single international entity other than Israel that is in favor of what Trump said. And it's kind of, it's all pretty similar in a lot of ways. So we're going to bounce around here. Jordan's King Abdullah, saying he rejected any attempts to annex land and displace Palestinians. The British Prime Minister said the Palestinians must be allowed home. They must be allowed to rebuild, and we should be with them in that rebuild on their way to a two-state solution. Qatar pushed back on it. Turkey said that any plan for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip is unacceptable, and anything leaving the Palestinians out of the equation would lead to more conflict. Saudi said they reject any attempts to displace the Palestinians from their land. Germany said that Gaza belongs to the Palestinians. British Foreign Minister said we've been clear in our belief that we must seek a two-state solution. France's foreign minister, they reiterate its opposition to any forced displacement of the Palestinian population. You kind of get the idea. On and on and on. It's the same thing all the way throughout. So we'll see. Is this an actual proposal that we could see U.S. troops pushed into the Gaza Strip to try to secure it in some way, shape, or form, rebuild the Strip for some future that's hard to predict? Is it just a negotiating tactic or something in between? It's a pretty chaotic time, but we'll do our best to keep an eye on it. Again, all of these resources will be linked in the description below. If you like this video, please don't forget to like. It actually does help the channel and help the video quite a bit. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.